How's everyone doing tonight? It is great to be here. It's my first time back in this house for probably 3 months now since we first closed. And let me tell you, I was craving the energy here. So I'm very, very thankful for being here. And thank you guys for sharing this moment with me. I would like to start tonight by reading a small text, a poem. Why here? Why now? The simple answer is because now is your time to be here, as it was for many before you, as it will be for many after you, until one day, in the grand plan of the Supreme Intelligence, it will be your time again. All who came before you fought their fight so that you too could fight yours. This is the way. From the moment you came to be, you are everlasting, forever, and free. Just like a moth flies to a beam of light in the darkness of night, you too are bound to seek, and yours will be enlightenment to meet. All you do and will ever do come together like notes on a melody that in harmony composes the songs that one day will be your symphony to play. No two songs are alike, for yours are the tools to write your own. Make them bright or somber, weak or stronger, filled with ire or meant to inspire. One thing is certain though, they are all yours and yours alone. No struggle nor glory are out of place in your soul story. Indeed, this life now is the life you need, and yours is the will to conquer and lead. So waste no time. There is no right and there is no wrong. Keep moving ahead and writing your song. When in doubt, no need to fear. Just look inside and stand strong, for there you'll find the voices of wisdom to guide you along. So this poem is talking about our lecture tonight. So it's talking about the evolution of the spirit, how we are in control of our own evolution, how we write the songs of our lives by the actions that we take while here and while now. And we all have a different experience, and there is no right and there is no wrong, and we are allowed to make mistakes. So let me ask you guys 2 questions. Where are you? Here? Right? And what time is it? Now? Right? It is funny to think about it this way, but everything you do and everything that you will ever do, it will be done in the here and now. So the past, present, or future, they're all a collection of many of these moments. And as a spirit, we are born simple and ignorant, meaning we have no knowledge. And as we develop, we start to acquire this knowledge. And Earth is one of the many places in the universe that we use in order to put in practice what we learn. But every time that we talk about here and now, or that we talk about the afterlife, or that we talk about incarnation, or what happens after death, there are many questions that come to mind. So, well, maybe not tonight. Let's try this here. There's this. Let's see now. There we go. Okay, so we are here to live, to learn, to evolve, and to transcend. And when we start to talk about those things, there are many questions that come to mind. Questions that you ask yourself, or things that you hear from other people. Is the afterlife for real? It's a common question. What proof do we have? What about reincarnation? Is it a fact or is it a hoax? Isn't Spiritism just another religion? Now, something very common that we hear is, I'm a science person, I don't believe in any of this. That is very common, right? But as a Spiritist, as somebody who studies Spiritism, we have a number of books and lectures and material that will talk to us about the afterlife and about reincarnation. But what if somebody asks you, well, what about other religions? Don't they have their sacred books as well? So is everything that I read in a book, am I supposed to take that as truth? The simple answer is no. And there is a main difference between Spiritism and main extreme religions. But in order to understand what they are, you have to first understand what Spiritism really is. And if we look to Allan Kardec, he will give us an answer. So Spiritism is a new science that has come to reveal to humans the existence and nature of the spirit world, and its relations with the corporeal world. So at a first glance, we can say that Spiritism is a science because everything that it teaches, it backs up with a scientific fact, either by trial and error or by the laws of physics that I studied. But you can also say that it is a philosophical doctrine because it also studies the evolution of morality in humans and its spiritual implications. So when you look at this definition, you begin to think that Spiritism can't be really a religion, right? We have no rituals. We don't erect any temples. We don't have any priests or reverends or anybody that occupies any position similar to that. Nobody has to be baptized. There are no rules to be followed. So when you start to think about what a religion is, we are lacking all of those things. But if everything that we do in Spiritism is backed by a scientific fact, so it's proven by science, then you could say that Spiritism is the future of all religions. So a fact or a teaching that is proven to be a fact has to be taken for what it is. And religions do that. They adapt, they evolve, right? We used to think that the earth was the center of the universe, then we used to think that the sun was the center of the universe. And churches used to say that. But once it was proven by a scientific fact, they also had to adapt. So in a sense, if we use science to back up our teachings, then we are the future of all religions. But we aren't a religion. Now, what are the sources that can back this up, right? If we're claiming that we are a science, then we have to look for science to prove what we teach. And I picked up a few examples of scientists that believe or that explain the afterlife and that explain spirituality. So this is Wernher von Braun. He might be familiar to you guys, especially if you if you read a lot of history, especially the history of wars. If you are a space enthusiast, he is very famous. He is also a very controversial person, but he has a few things to say about spirituality, about the afterlife, about life after death. Science and religion are not antagonists. On the contrary, they are sisters. While science tries to learn more about the creation, religion tries to better understand the Creator. While through science, man tries to harness the forces of nature around him, through religion, he tries to harness the forces of nature within him, which is one of the teachings of Spiritism. So von Braun, he was born in Germany, He did a lot of work for the German military. He also helped to develop missiles during the wars, the Nazi war. And his technology was used to take the life of thousands of people. And after the war, he was brought to the States. And here he served a different purpose. He worked for the military service, but he was mostly focused on developing technology that eventually put the first American satellite into space, and after that took the United States to the moon. So it was thanks to his discoveries that man made to the moon. But he was also very spiritual. And he used to say that if anybody understands anything about physics, it would be impossible not to understand how there is life after death. It says you can just look at a very simple physics law. Nothing in nature disappears. Everything transforms. It doesn't matter how minute or how big it is. Nothing will ever stop to exist. It will only change into something else. And he used to say that if you really think about that, and if you apply the simple law of physics, what makes you think that God allows everything to transform, but he would allow his greatest creation to stop existing, which is the human soul? He also believed in reincarnation. And he used to say, which is very interesting because if you think about how he started his life or what he did in his earlier years, for somebody who believes in reincarnation, there is a little bit of a disconnect. But he used to say that not only we live this life, we'll have the opportunity to come back and live another life. But the life we'll live next will be greatly impacted by the actions that we take in this life. Meaning, the way you conduct yourself now will dictate how your next life will be easier or more difficult. And I also picked him to talk a little bit about intelligence and morality. Von Braun was clearly a very bright man. But what about his morality, his morals, his values? Where were they? So that comes to show that even though intelligence and morality are two pillars of our spiritual evolution, they don't really evolve or develop at the same time. So he can develop one or the other first. In his case, he was extremely bright, but he lacked on that human connection. Somebody else might not be as intelligent or possess that much knowledge, but might have a very stronger moral pillar. So it's important to understand that as we are evolving, we are working on those two different aspects as well. Besides him, I have Ian Stevenson, also a man of science, very intelligent. He was a professor of psychiatry and medicine for the University of Virginia. He was also the chair for the psychiatry and neurology department. But most of his work was not done at the university. His passion was in proving that there is life after death. And most of his studies and most of his professional life was spent studying cases of people who had memories from a different life, but in a very peculiar space too. Not only he was looking for memories of a past life, he was looking to link those memories to somebody from the past, and not only that, he was looking for specific marks. So he focused on birthmarks or body deformities that had something to do with a wound or a certain situation at the time of death in the previous life. And he has a wonderful number of work in this subject. He has about 3,000 different accounts. He has written many books. So in his words, reincarnation, at least as I conceive it, does not nullify what we know about evolution and genetics. It suggests, however, that there may be two streams of evolution, the biological one and the personal one, and that during terrestrial lives, these streams may interact. If you like reading and if this is a subject that you enjoy, I recommend looking him up and looking for his work. One of his most studied work is Reincarnation in Biology. And this is a book that has about 3,000 pages. It's divided into different volumes where he puts an account of all of those cases and he makes a direct link between this life and he correlates that with a previous life, and he is able to make a correlation that is backed up by documents, obituaries. So it's a very, very interesting study. Maybe one of the most known cases of this is the James Leninger case. He is a little boy from the U.S. that remembers being a military pilot during the Second World War. And since he was a little baby, he would have nightmares about his plane crashing. He would have recollections of people that he was friends with, people that fought with him, and he was able to account and identify those people. So there's a documentary as well about him, a very interesting case that backs this fact up as well. But we don't have to look only at science in order to find proof of reincarnation and life after life. If you're looking for something that is more religious-based or more biblical, you can look to the Bible for that. And you will find countless examples where they are speaking, or Jesus is speaking about reincarnation or life after death. One of my favorite ones is in John 3, 5, and 7. So Jesus is having a conversation with Nicodemus, who is asking him, what do I do? What does a man do in order to enter the kingdom of God? To which Jesus says, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, you must be born again. A lot of people read this passage and they interpret this as Jesus talking about baptism, but it is really not about baptism. It has to do with the way that the Bible was translated. What he is talking about here are the two principles that govern the entire universe, which is the material principle and the spiritual principle. So water here is related to the material side, where spirit is related to the spiritual side. But even if you get pushbacks on this, you can go to Matthew 17, which is the story of the transfiguration of Jesus, where he takes the disciples to the mount. As they are gathered, this bright light comes into the sky, and they see Moses and Elijah alongside with Jesus. And they also hear the voice of God that tells them that this is my son. So they get very scared. They lower down. And then when they come to themselves, Elijah is gone, Moses is gone. So they're looking at Jesus and they say, but how can this be? The prophecy says that before you come, Elijah has to come. To which Jesus says, Elijah will come, which is interesting, but he has already come, and you did not recognize him, and you did not treat him as such. To which he was alluding that Elijah was John the Baptist. But the interesting part is that he says he will come and prepare the way, meaning that not only he has already come back as John the Baptist, but he will come back again. So if that is not talking about reincarnation, I can't explain what that could be. Right? So you can look. So you can look for science, or you can look for religion to answer or to back up spirituality. Reincarnation. Now this is Dion Fortune. So she is a British scholar. She was also a medium. And she's a very interesting figure. She used to say, she claimed, that she received teachings from spirits, very similar to how Spiritism was started. And she helped to, so she was one of the co-founders of the Fraternity of the Inner Light, which was a group that believed in reincarnation and life after death. And the teachings came from the ones they called the Ascended Masters, which in their explanations were people that had lived here, were now in the spiritual world, and he was teaching them about spiritual life, very similar to Spiritism. But she used to say that the descent into matter must be complete before the ascent to a spirit can commence. And this is very profound, because it has to do with our evolution as spirits. Even though we are spiritual, we need the material existence before we can only live in spirit, or before we no longer need to reincarnate, right? So we need this material existence, but not only just a material existence, not only just a being here and living through this life. It needs to be a conscious material existence. So you need to be in control. You cannot only be on cruise control. You have to be able to make your decisions. You have to be able to learn. Because a life lived unconsciously, it is just a tick on the board. It doesn't really count for much, right? So a conscious existence is essential so you can transcend, right? And as spirits, as we are learning how to live and as we are acquiring all this knowledge, we start to shed layers. So think about it this way. You start your existence as being very material, as being extremely attached to matter. And as you develop, as you acquire moral virtues, you start to shed those layers, and you start to become more and more spiritual. Kind of like something has to die in order for something else to be born, in the sense of that you have to rid all of your vices and your vile nature. So hatred has to go, ego has to go, anger has to go. So anything that is a giant of the soul that holds you back, all of that you need to shed so you can give room for to compassion and love and care. So before you become this more compassionate, loving being, you need to shed all those layers. And as you shed all those layers, we start to evolve. So you go from a impure spirit to a pure spirit. And there are many levels of evolution between one and the other. So you could say that we start life as being imperfect spirits. We then graduate to being good spirits. And eventually we'll become pure spirits. But it's important to understand that within each one of these levels, there's a number of other categories. And it takes thousands and thousands of years to go from one to the other within each one of those three classes. So imperfect spirits, for them, matter is predominant. They are very attached to material world. They are governed by vile passions and vices, and they benefit most from reincarnation. And why is it? Because it is through reincarnation, it's through being here and now, that we perfect ourselves, that we learn. So this is the place where we come and we learn and we make mistakes and we repeat things over and over, and that's okay. Nobody learns at the same pace. We all write our own songs, right? So, and you get to come back as many times as you need in order for that to happen. But once you're ready, then you move from being an imperfect spirit to being a good spirit. So in this class, You will strive for more excellence. Good will always prevail on you. But you will still benefit from incarnations. And we do have trials to undergo because we are not perfect yet. We are still working on that perfection. But in this category, we understand God better. And God is part of our reality without us having to question whether there is or there isn't life after death, whether we do or do not get to come back here. And then once you move to the next class, then you are classified as a pure spirit. So for a pure spirit, matter has no more influence over them. They possess moral and intellectual superiority. So once a spirit reaches this level, they have no more need to incarnate in order to continue to evolve. So once we get to this point, there is nothing that tells us that we have to go back to the body, that we have to become matter again, that we have to become solid. But many spirits, even though they are pure spirits, they will make a conscious decision to live a material existence. But then you might ask yourself, well, what purpose does that serve? Why would anyone, after going through all of this, now that they're allowed to live in spirit only, why would they want to come back here? Why would they want to be back in the body where it's heavy and you drag yourself and there's suffering and there's pain? Well, you can look at it as a mission. So they choose to come back to a past that many times has been long forgotten and endure pain and suffering and everything that comes with being in the flesh as a way of self-sacrificing for the benefit of others. So they decide, they make a conscious decision to be here so they can aid humanity in their evolution. Can anybody think of anyone who has done that? Jesus, right? It's the perfect example of a pure spirit that decided to embrace a material existence again so that we could learn, so that he could show us the way, to aid us in our own search for morality. Now, it's important to understand that not only spirits evolve, but worlds also evolve. So worlds are the places in the universe where we get to learn, where we put in practice every piece of knowledge that we are acquiring. But the same way that there are different classes of spirit, there has to be different types of worlds that can host those spirits. So a more material spirit could never live in a world like Jupiter, as an example. Can you imagine living in Jupiter? It would be impossible. So we need a world that can host us. In our case, it's Earth. But as you start to lose your layers and you start to become less material and more spiritual, you also need a world that can host you in those stages of your evolution. So just like us, they also develop. And they go from primitive worlds to worlds of trials and expiations, worlds of regeneration, blissful worlds, and heavenly worlds. Now, the interesting thing is that spirits in the world, or the worlds and the spirits within them, even though they're both developing and evolving, they do not do that at the same time necessarily. So a primitive world would be a world where the spirits living in there, the beings that inhabit that world, they suffer a lot. There's a lot of pain. Their living is mostly by looking for food, so they have to look for their daily sustenance in order to just survive. So it's really difficult, kind of like the caveman era of Earth, right? But I have a brief definition of the worlds here for you. So a primitive world. So they are worlds yet not developed, where its inhabitants are wild and life is much harder, consisting of daily struggles only aimed at finding food. So Earth has been through this stage. And we evolved. So The next one would be worlds of trials and expiations, where life is also very hard. It's not easy, and it's filled with pain and suffering. That's probably where we do most of our learning. But if you were to compare a world of trial and expiation to a primitive world, one could say that it feels like paradise. But those worlds, they're filled with hardships, pain, and suffering as means of teaching its inhabitants the lessons they lack. Currently, that's where we are. So Earth is a world of trial and expiation. And our next step in the evolution would be to become a world of regeneration. So when the spirit has learned enough and is ready to move from a world of trial and expiation, it moves into a world of regeneration. So they accept and experience God in a more intimate way, and they strive to get closer to Him. In the world of regeneration, it's not like we're not having to learn, we do. But most of the vile passions that we have and the vices that we have already worked on them. And the world itself is calmer. It doesn't harbor a lot of natural disasters that inflict pain, which is also one of the tools that spirits use to teach us, right? We can learn by love, pain, or suffering. In the world of trials and expiation, there's a lot of learning through pain and suffering, but in the world of regeneration, your learning is done through love because you accept that. Then you move on to a blissful world. So in this world, the spirits, they are no longer bound by flesh. So they don't have to have a body as we have a body in this. But they still benefit from reincarnation. So they possess the human form, but they are more refined. Their lives are much longer than ours. And one interesting part is that they don't fear death anymore. There is no fear of dying because they understand death more like a rite of passage to something better. But we still have a lot of fear of the unknown, of what comes next. That will stop existing once you reach a blissful world. And then heavenly worlds. So in these worlds, they are inhabited by pure spirits, but they are no longer bound by matter, and they also don't have to stay put in that world. They can travel freely wherever they want to go. Now, here in our solar system, we have examples of all of these categories, right? We are currently in a world of trial and of expiation, but that is about to change.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you come back there for a minute? Okay, we are here,
Yes.
filled with hardships, not goodness, pain, awful news, suffering, worse news. Okay, can't I evolve without going through all this nightmare?
Of course you can. We all can,
Okay.
right? So, and it is what I said before. You can choose love, where when the lessons are presented to you, you don't fight them, you embrace them.
Can you give me an example? How can I evolve without just through love? Because it's hard to love my mother-in-law, you know?
Yes.
It's kind of hard. She is a wonderful person for other people, but there's some lacking there.
Okay, but have you stopped to think why she acts that way?
Probably because of me. That I married her son.
Maybe, right? But maybe sometimes somebody is angry towards you, or they harbor feelings that you don't understand, and maybe those feelings are not even directed at you. Maybe it has to do with their own story of their own lives. So rather than judging them and not accepting them for who they are, but if you do it differently, if you understand their story and you decide to love them rather than criticizing them, then that's one way that you're learning by love. You're learning how to forgive. You're learning how to accept rather than give pushbacks and criticize. So that's one choice that you could make. There's a very funny story about this, about the mother and the daughter, the daughter-in-law. So this daughter-in-law married this guy, And her mother-in-law hated her. So she wanted her to die. So she looked for a medicine man who said, hey, listen, I hate my mother-in-law, and I can't live with her. I want her to die, but I don't want them to know that I killed her. I want it to happen slowly. Can you help me? And he goes, well, are you certain that this is what you want? You want to kill your mother-in-law? She's like, yes, that's everything I wanted. Okay, so he gave her a little bag of tea. And he said, every day you make her tea, and you put a little bit of this in the tea, and you give it to her. And slowly, she'll die. So she started doing this, and she started to take care of this mother-in-law that was sick, and she would give her tea, and time started to go by. 6 months down the road. Now she loved her mother-in-law. She didn't want to kill her anymore, but now she was feeding her poison. So she went back to the medicine man, and she said, I don't want to kill my mother-in-law anymore. I learned how to love her. I spent so much time with her that I understand her now. And I don't want to lose her. To which this wise man stopped, and he looked at her, and he said, it's okay. What I've given you is nothing but sugar. So he was teaching her a lesson by making her think that she was killing her mother-in-law. He made her spend time with the person who in turn taught her how to love her.
Okay, I will not use this technique. I will not, but I will try to see her in a different.
So that's one example. So, as I was saying, the world, so spirits evolve and the worlds evolve as well, but they don't necessarily evolve at the same time, right? They're evolving differently. So you can look at a world and understand that its development in the material sense, the losing of matter is how a world will develop materially. It will become less active, as an example, with less cataclysms. And the morality of its inhabitants is what's going to dictate how spiritual the world is. But if we think of one world, so there are things that happen. So we have migrations, immigration, mass departures. So if you think of Earth as an example, there is a group of spirits that is associated with Earth only. So we are incarnating and disincarnating in Earth. And that's what happens with the migration. So it's the same group of spirit that come into this planet and leave this planet, and another one comes and they live. So they are in this rotation, kind of like if you go to a water park and you go down the water slide, you go down the water slide, you come back up the line, you go down again. So it's the same principle. So within a world and a group of spirits, you have the migration. If somebody in that group becomes more evolved and the world can no longer harbor them, then they immigrate to a different world. And this happens all the time. In the vastness of the universe, with the vastness of worlds, we have this circulation of spirits. Well, but there comes a time in the world development and its inhabitants where both of them reach a point of convergence when they're both ready to move on to the next phase, where the spirits are becoming more evolved and the world is becoming more evolved, and they do this jump together. So rather than the spirits going to a different world, they move on together. And this is what is happening to Earth right now. So we've done this once, and we're getting ready to do it again. And what we see today, the pandemic as an example, that's one sign of the cycle that we are currently happening. And it doesn't happen as punishment or because we did something wrong. It's completely the opposite. It happens because this is what's going to aid us into getting to the next level. So this has been happening in Earth for a while now. So if you think of the past decades, we had 2 world wars, we had the flu pandemic of 1918 that killed millions of people. We had several natural disasters, tsunamis and earthquakes, and in every single of those occasions, we had a mass departure where a large group of spirits, they all leave at the same time. And a large group of spirits starts to reincarnate back in this world, kind of what's happening right now with the pandemic that we're in. So it's hard, it's painful, and it hurts. but it serves a greater purpose too. So there are two things that happen. When this mass departure happens, all of the spirits go into the spiritual world. A lot of them will have the opportunity to come back and try to get to the level where they can move with the planet as well. In case they're not able to get to the level they need to be, they will then go to a different planet. They will no longer stay here. So they're going to go to a different world that will be suited to the stage that they found themselves in. But at the same time that this group is leaving, there are other spirits coming in. Not only spirits belonging to this group of this mass departure, but spirits that are more evolved. They are coming in a mission, or they are coming from a different world where they themselves were not able to follow that world. But compared to us, they are so much more evolved. Not only they will, in this case, be expiating themselves, but they will also aid us into becoming a world of regeneration in this case. So to be where we are right now is hard and it's difficult, but we have to be able to look at it not as something that is intolerable or that is horrifying, but as a road that is going to lead us to a much better place. So following this times of great cataclysms and great mass departures where there's a lot of pain involved, there will be a time that will be blessed with different knowledge and a better world and a better a better kind of spirit. So we do have to go through this hard push, but in a very, very near future, there is a time of abundance coming to us. And everything is done according to the laws of God. Everything is done through divine providence. And nothing is done with the meaning of hurting or causing pain. But everything is done in the means of rebirth and growing and learning. And I know it's hard to be thankful or to understand what is going on right now. But if we're able to see that after the storm, there is a sunny day coming around, there is a better world for us, then we'll be better prepared to together walk through this so we can welcome the new life that is coming to us. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed the talk tonight. I want to finish by playing a video for you. So it's a message to help us get through this. Every morning, as I open my eyes, I want to believe that what we now live is nothing but a nightmare, and that the world still moves the way it did back somewhere. I want to believe thousands aren't sick, thousands haven't died, and thousands more will not come to pass. I wake up and I look for the busyness of cities, the honking of cars, and the chatter of people. I look for kids running around, living abound, and screaming out loud. But they're not there. All I do is sit and stare, trying to control my heart before I give in to despair. My chest tightens and my breathing gets heavy with the suffering I see and hear through whispers everywhere. And I know that in the silence around, inside of walls, out in the hallways, above and below, the sick lay low. Sons and daughters cry the loss of parents. Fathers and mothers weep within to keep their pains all locked in. Sad eyes where light once stood, and grins on faces where smiles were seen. Now hiding behind their masks, keeping again their pains locked in and their sorrows within. Tick-tock, says the clock, time's running out. Get out, get out! A voice screams out loud. Leave your hideout and look over there, where men once stood with their hatred and anger, where battles were fought and thousands were lost. Look at the ground stained in red by the greed you had and all the bad you shared. Look at the sea covered in black, battered and beaten by all you took and all you've eaten. Look again and tell me what you see if not deserts and smog, disguised as fog, covering the ground, now missing their trees. So now tell me, why do you cry? If forever men go, all is doomed to die. You sit by a pool, clapping and cheering as whales play fool, not realizing in the dark of night they howl and cry, screaming to the moon, hoping it will all be over soon. Your city's blind, the sky. You teach your kids to lie. You look at the poor and you lock your door. But now you complain that I've given you a little pain? Now close your eyes and take a deep breath in. Tell me again, what do you see with men locked in and the world set free? See over there, where bombs were blown and blood was drawn, death is no longer around, and new life is now found. Grass is coming in, flowers in bloom. You can see again the stars and the moon. Nature, you see, the way it should be. But before I go, there's one more thing you should know. I gave you the world filled with love, showed you the way, but taken by greed, you threw it away. I then gave you pain, but taking it in vain, you gave me disdain. So, to bring you back from your own wreck, I locked you away, so that by suffering this way, I could help you see that this is not the way to be. As you mourn and squeal, nature has time to heal. It pains me to teach you this way, but for all the love I have for you, once this is all done and through, you will have the world anew. A new era is coming. Now open your eyes, look my way, let me wipe your tears away and welcome you to the dawn of a brand new day.